I hate the thought of being involved in any kind of skirmish outside the boxing ring. But if it push came to shove, I think the shortest jab or uppercut into the solar plexus. I wouldn't go for the head, and that's because a guy might put his head down, you might smash your knuckles against his head, you might put an elbow up, and you might hit the elbow. The pain is all yours and in your hand. So I would go right through the middle with the very, very short uppercut or jab right into the solar plexus and invite him to catch his breath for the next 5 minutes.
Hello, Frank. Welcome to Caley Corner, episode 11. A real pleasure for me to have you on. Obviously, ex-boxer, ex-journalist, ex-broadcaster, and I read that you were a playwright as well, so it seems like you're a bit of a jack of all trades.
Oh, yeah, and maybe master of none. I did it long enough before I was found out. I mean, the journalism I did for 55 years. I was a news reporter, then kind of was sidelined into sport because the editor of the paper that I worked for at the time in Aberdeen, the Evening Express, thought that because I had a boxing background, I would be interested in doing sport. Well, he couldn't have been further from the truth. And I didn't really want to shift from news. I loved it. I loved the fact that every day in news was different, right? Whereas in football, everything's pretty much the same. You wouldn't even have to attend a football press conference. You could just make up the quotes because you know what they're going to say. It's so predictable. And, with respect to my colleagues in journalism, there's only so many questions you can ask a football manager. More often than not, you never get the truth because they want to hide things. They don't want to tell too much about that. Obviously, don't want to tell their tactics and that kind of stuff. Don't want to tell about injuries to players. So what you're getting from them is kind of half-truths and little kind of leading you down alleyways, and they're telling you what they want you to know and not what you want to know. So, but anyway, I did that. It took me a long, long time. Maybe after I did maybe 6 or 8 years on news and then into sport, it took me kind of 45 years to find that out.
It took you 45 years to find that you didn't like it?
Well, no, I didn't say I didn't like it. I liked it, but you get a bit weary of it, Well, I did it for so long on newspapers, and I went into TV, and I did it for a long, long time in TV at STV. Well, at the time it was Grampian Television, covering everywhere up north, and so you get kind of the same people in football. It's not like a news story when you go out and everything's different and everything's new to you. And you could do high court trials and all that stuff. You can cover murders, disasters, as I did Piper Alpha, Fraserburgh lifeboat disaster in 1970 when 5 men were lost, that kind of stuff. That's the excitement. But then if you're going down and speaking to the same manager maybe 2 or 3 times a week, then it becomes wearisome. But anyway, I mean, I'm not complaining. I loved it. I loved it, really did. But then this came along, social media, and that's given me a new lift. It's reinvigorated me, and it's changed. So when I used to walk down Union Street in Aberdeen, and people say, "Oh, I see you on the TV and all that." Now, and it happened today on the Byres Road in Glasgow. We went into a restaurant, my son and I, Paul. We went into a restaurant. We'd walked about 5 minutes from the car where we parked the car into a restaurant in Byres Road, and we sat down, and the phone went. It was a comment on Instagram saying, "I've just seen you in Byres Road, and I'm taking my mum down to the Ship Inn, I think, or the Ship Pub, and she's going to sing a couple of blues numbers. Well, I can't believe I just saw you in Byres Road." And I thought, this is unreal. So this is the kind of new thing for me. And a lot of young people are in shops and I'm buying stuff, and they'll kind of, I could see them nudging each other, and then they'll say, "Are you the guy on TikTok or Instagram?" Whatever they watch. So it's brilliant for me. I love it.
So in terms of that, you're sort of saying it's giving you this, it's reinvigorated you. Like, what would be the perfect day for you now, Frank? Like, obviously, I hope you don't mind me mentioning your age. You're 78 now.
Yeah.
And it seems like obviously you weren't in the public eye for a while, it looks like there, and then suddenly you've sort of blew up overnight. So what is your perfect sort of day now? I know you were in teaching a seminar earlier. Is that the kind of thing you love to do? Or
I love the seminars, and it's because the people who come are invested in boxing, right? They might not be boxers. They might just be people who like boxing training. And I was at Glasgow Fitness today, and there were about 40 or 50 people there. And they're kind of, I could see them hanging on my every word. Because my whole ethos is technique and skill. And I don't like to see guys, for example, two young guys going against each other in a bout, in an amateur contest, and trying to, beat each other to a pulp. And I keep saying to them, where is the science? Where is the technique? This is what you've got to learn. Why are you taking punches when you need not? And they say, well, how do I stop? And you know what? For me, of course, because I'm, so experienced and long in the tooth, it's simple. It's common sense, but it's what I learned growing up. And for them, it's not. It's all new, right? So if you say to them, well, there is a way to stop jabs coming through your guard and punching you in the nose and giving you a sore face. There is a way. And they'll say, oh, really? How do you? So you tell them that. But the thing about that is, I say to myself, why aren't the amateur coaches telling them this? Why is it all about aggression, attack? Where is the science? Where is the kind of pulling the guy into a trap and then counter-punching him? That kind of stuff.
I would say Josh Taylor's got a bit of that about him, but no.
Sure.
Like he can take a punch, but he certainly knows he's good with his feints.
Of course he does. He's a very experienced boxer. He had a terrific amateur career. And that's what people forget. Think, lots of people think, they're just professional boxers who have kind of arrived as professional boxers. But these guys have served their apprenticeship, most of them. Mm-hmm. I mean, you do get guys nowadays, and this bothers me in professional boxing, where they go and say, I've had 5 fights as an amateur. And you get representatives of the British Boxing Board of Control saying, you want a licence? Yeah. Okay, let's get the medical then. You've had 5 fights. Right, we'll stamp your card. You're not a pro boxer. So the public, many members of the public are thinking, professional boxer, must be good. When in fact, no, professional boxer means one thing, you get paid. So, don't be kidded on. If somebody's a professional boxer, he's, inevitably he's a good boxer. That's not always the case. So, the pro boxing thing, I'm not greatly interested in it. Certainly not in Scotland. I would like to see more pro boxers earning their spurs, if you know what I mean, rather than just turning up and boxing and being beaten. And I'd like to see promoters looking after boxers more and managers, so that you don't get these kind of what they call journeymen boxers who are fed to the young piranhas who are coming through the ranks, And so they say, okay, you've had 50 contests and you've lost 48. You'd be a good match for our young up-and-coming guy. And you know that this guy hasn't got a hope in hell of winning. He's just in there to take the punches. I would like to see that eradicated, because it's not fair on the guy. The guy is going to end up, when he retires from boxing, he's going to end up with a sore face. He's going to end up with marks on his face and probably a brain that's been scrambled by so many defeats.
Aye. Why is that changed then, Frank? Because obviously you had a long amateur career. It seems as though something shifted in, the 70s, 80s and 90s to move away from that sort of system. Why do you think that's happened?
I don't know. I think people, that in the 70s, in the 60s, 70s, when I was boxing, you had these guys who came up through the ranks, had good amateur careers. They won either district championships or national titles or ABA titles. They boxed for their country. And they then thought, right, the natural progression is to turn professional and continue my career that way. And that was fine. But now you're getting these guys that are turning professional after 5 minutes in boxing, and they're being allowed to And this is where they've got to be protected from themselves. In my view, they've got to be looked after by the British Boxing Board of Control saying, "Sorry, son, you're not good enough." So that way you've got to filter the quality, in my view.
It'll be very much case dependent though, right? Because I think Joshua didn't have much of an amateur career, or Dillian White certainly didn't. And Prince Nassim Hamed's son just signed for Frank Warren yesterday, and he's had no amateur fights. He's just went straight into the pros. So there is cases.
So what's right about that? I don't see anything right about that. You're talking about Joshua Wilder. That's a different. Now, what you're talking about now is the heavyweight division. Heavyweights are different. I did a boot camp in Lanzarote a few weeks ago. And it was done through a Glasgow gym called Boxers Booth. And they had about, 25 boxers over there, boys and girls, for 2 weeks. Well, most of them stayed for 2 weeks. Some stayed for a week. And they were training hard every single day, all kinds of training and competitive stuff. It was a great kind of bonding exercise. I was there to do a seminar every day. And teach them the skills, if you know what I mean. And what we found was that the enthusiasm was there. And I'm thinking, there's a guy walked in, and he was 6'11", and he was a heavyweight naturally. He was 103 kilograms, which is, I guess, about 17 stone. His name was Hennock. His first name was Hennock. And I thought, wow, he could box, right? He'd only had 3 contests as an amateur. And I thought, maybe wrongly, because of your size and your athleticism, you carrying absolutely zero fat, and you could box. I said to him, if you're handled properly, you could make a lot of money in boxing. Now, I would not have said the same thing to a welterweight or a lightweight, but the heavyweight division is where all the focus is on. It's the same old thing they used to say in Scotland. The wee men do all the fighting, the big men get all the money. And it's still the same today. We're all kind of going crazy about the Tyson Furies and the Mike Tysons and the Wilders and the Joshuas and so on. But actually, if you were to boil that down, the real boxers, the technical boxers, are the guys like Terence Crawford, Garcia, Gervonta Davis, these guys in the lighter weights. The big guys can't manage that mobility. If you look at Tyson Fury, 6'9", 20 stone, where's the mobility there? How could he possibly shift that bulk, round a ring in any way that's kind of artistic or scientific or technical?
I don't know if I agree with you on the Tyson Fury point, to be fair. He moves like a middleweight sometimes, and Usyk as well. I think they've got, for big men.
You study him. Tyson Fury's 1-2 grab, right? You won't see Tyson Fury hit 3, 4, 5 combination punches because he doesn't have the mobility. And it's not, you can't do that as a big man. It's not his fault. That's the way he's built. So that's why he's got a very good jab. Long left jab, 1-2 grab. What does the grab do? Grab gives him a chance to rest, but more than that, it gives him a chance to rest his 20 stone onto his opponent and therefore suck the energy from him. So that's a tactic he uses really well. And it's worked for him up till now. Who knows? Usyk is a far superior boxer to Fury. But you give him the height and reach advantage of Fury, you give him the weight advantage, who knows? But my money would be on Usyk to win that one. Don't have me back when he gets beat down and say you were wrong.
I think I'd be backing Fury, I think, to be fair. And his style's changed over the years, right? Like when he fought Klitschko, he was more of a sort of stick and move sort of, heavyweight. And then now when he's moved over, I forget his trainer's name, but
Ben Davis. Oh no, Ben Davis had moved to Joshua.
What's the boy? Sugar Ray Hill, is it? Sugar Hill.
Sugar Hill, that's right.
And his dad, it seems like they're pushing him more on, you're a big man with a lot of, he has got a bit of power as well now, so I think he'll smother Usyk, I think, and I think he might end up stopping him.
Paul, I will demand to come on here if you're wrong.
Likewise, it'll be good to see you again. But if we go back to the seminar, Frank, right, and one thing I wanted to ask you was, obviously you've been boxing for your whole life, it looks like. If you were in a self-defence situation, or one of your sons was, and they had to use some sort of technique to get out a dodge effectively, what's the one punch that you sort of, or the one combination that you put people towards to sort of defend yourself?
Well, right, okay, you've put me on the spot here. I hate the thought of being involved in any kind of skirmish outside the boxing ring. But if it push came to shove, I think the shortest jab or uppercut into the solar plexus. I wouldn't go for the head, and that's because guy might put his head down, you might smash your knuckles against his head, you might put an elbow up, and you might hit the elbow, and the pain is all yours in your hand. So I would kind of go right through the middle with the very, very short uppercut or jab right into the solar plexus and invite him to catch his breath for the next 5 minutes.
Interesting. And what about, what another thing was, can you remember like the first time you ever stepped into a boxing gym, like your earliest memories, or like when you fell in love with the sport effectively? Yeah,
well, what you've got to remember is my whole family were boxers. My two elder brothers, both of whom boxed at a very high level. My oldest brother, Daniel, was a British youth champion. Dennis, next brother, and they were much older than me, right? 9 and 11 years older than me. And Dennis was Scottish light welterweight champion, boxed for Scotland many times. And then he went on actually to run his own club and became an Olympic referee. And he became a referee who was much in demand all over Europe. So when countries like the Ukraine and Germany and round about those areas, Denmark and so on, would have a foreign team coming to box against their team, and they needed a neutral referee, Dennis was invariably the man they turned to because he had such a high reputation in world boxing for being a referee. So I started going to my dad's gym in Lochie in Dundee. Dundee's very much a fighting town. Lots of great fighters came from Dundee. I started going there when I was 4. And it was really just a case because my mother probably said, my dad, take him out the way and, give me peace. So I would go down to the gym, which was, at that time, it was about a quarter of a mile walk from our front door. And it was very primitive when you look back, and lots of guys there. But I was soaking up, of course, you're unaware at that age, you're soaking up the atmosphere, the smells, the noise of guys punching the bag, the sparring. You're looking at that, you're watching. And I've got a similar situation just now because in the gym where I train, and I've been training there for a couple of years, there's a little guy who's the son of the owner. The owner of the gym is a guy called Tom McPherson, whose son Gregor is a professional. And the little brother is called Arlo, and he's a redhead, and he's fiery. Well, I've been sparring with him since he was 3. Right, so I'm on my knees and I allow him to belt the hell out of me. And sometimes he's getting 5, he's 5 now, and now it's beginning to get sore. So that was my scenario. I would go and I would do that, and my brothers would kneel down and I would hit them. So I was getting the feel for it all the time. Then at age of 7, I had my first, what they call today a skills contest. It's an exhibition. And they put me in as the kind of opener for a tournament and against another 7-year-old. And they declared it a draw because it was a bit fun and the crowd got a laugh and so on. But what did that do for me? It allowed me to experience an audience, and to know what it felt like to box and perform in front of an audience. So I was hooked by then.
Aye. So because you started so young, did you ever have nerves or fear? It sounds like maybe no, because of you were sort of indoctrinated in it for such a young age?
No, I've been nervous every single fight. And that's something I can't explain. I used to be in awe of all these guys who swaggered around before their fights, in the dressing room, in the changing room. And I couldn't do that. They were oozing confidence, right? I couldn't find that. What I found was I was always kind of not worried, but I was always a wee bit concerned before going for it. Right, how is this going to go? How am I going to perform? How's it going to? Is he going to hurt me? What's he going to be like? What if he catches me? All these things used to play on my mind. I remember the first time I boxed twice in the Royal Albert Hall in London against England, and the first time I went, and I haven't got one of these smiley faces, as you can tell because you're looking at me now. I've got one of these kind of what I call a resting face. For me, a smile, it takes a lot of energy. So I used to sit there, and I was sitting in the changing room, England against Scotland, 1960, I don't know, 3 or 4. Ken Buchanan's on the bill. We're all there for Scotland. Some great fighters, Bobby Mallon from Denniston, John McCluskey from Hamilton, went on to become the British flyweight champion professionally. So many names. At that time, I must tell you, Paul, at that time, all the Scotland international matches, all the England international matches were televised live by the BBC. So boxing was on every Thursday night on the BBC, nationwide. So it had a big audience. It had a big following, almost just below football. We used to be on the back pages, splash of the national newspapers. When we went abroad to box, the Daily Record, the Daily Express, which was the biggest paper of the day, 650,000 sales a day of the Daily Express in Scotland, and the Daily Mail would send their boxing writers. That would never happen now, not with an amateur team. So that was all part of the nerves and the kind of you're not worried, but you're kind of thinking about it. The only time I felt where I never had an adverse thought, I was boxing in Copenhagen, and they asked me to go over there and box a guy called Borg Krog, who was their big hero over there. He was a lightweight. This was when I was a lightweight. And he was going to the 1964 Olympics in Tokyo. Now, the way things were going in my career, I should have been there. But in the run-up to the Scottish Championships that year, so you had to be the Scottish champion, and you had to be the British champion to get into the GB team. I would have done it. I would have been there. But for the fact that I boxed a guy, I won't tell you his name because I felt sorry, because at one point I thought, this is ridiculous that the referee is not stepping in to stop this. Eventually he did. But I was hitting this guy so easily, and he was flailing, and I'm thinking, please, to the referee, I'm saying to myself, please, you need to step in and save this guy. However, what happened with the upshot was I hit him so hard and so often that both my knuckles, the first knuckles on each hand, swelled to like the size of a ping pong ball. That ruled me out of the championships, and therefore a place in the British Olympic team. But that's the way it goes. But I go over to Denmark to fight their star, who was going to the Olympics. And I remember it vividly, watching the previous fight. I sat at ringside, I was gloved up, and it was the calmest I've ever been. And I can't explain why. I was just so calm, and I was looking forward to it, and I thought, this is going to be great for me. And I wish I'd thought like that in all my other contests. I went in there, and I absolutely destroyed that guy. And then he got the verdict. And one of their officials pulled me aside. He said, you won that out the park. In fact, the guy said that to me. He said, I can't understand it, the boxer. And I said, yeah, I know. He said, but we couldn't possibly send our star boxer to the Olympic Games, and this is his final fight before he goes.
On a defeat.
With a defeat. Aye. And that's the way it went.
Aye. We might get into that, the sort of judging at the Olympics and stuff like that, because that's that's not just a historic thing, right? It happened to Conlon as well recently, and
Yes.
maybe we'll get to that.
You're right.
Do you have a view like on when kids like should be introduced to boxing, or like when they should start watching it? Because what you're talking about there about it being on the BBC and all that, it seems like there's maybe people in society who probably are trying to shield, younger kids for boxing and see it as a bit primitive and all that sort of stuff. That wouldn't be my take on things anyway. Like, I remember watching Rocky when I was under 5 and it was my favourite movie, right? I think a lot of guys in my generation get introduced to boxing, and then in the 90s I would watch your Eubanks, your Collins, your Prince Nazis and all that, my dad, and it's some of my best memories of seeing my dad sort of getting animated in front of the TV, so it'd be interesting to get your take on that.
You mentioned Rocky, Sylvester Stallone. His brother Frank is one of my followers, and he keeps in touch with me, because he's a very interesting guy. He's a boxing historian as well as being a musician, songwriter and so on. And he knows everything about boxing, going way, way back to Jimmy Wilde, Harry Greb, Benny Lynch, all these great names in boxing. You put me on the spot here with that question, and I'll tell you why.
We'll keep doing that, Frank. That's going to be a theme.
Right. I'll tell you why. I never encourage my kids. I've got 2 sons, right? Paul, whom you know, he boxed as a youth. He had about 15 contests. And I remember he injured his hand once in training, and he had to have a layoff for a few weeks. And then he said, right, I'm going to get back. I did everything. Actually, not with his knowledge, but I did everything to dissuade him from going back to the gym. Boxing is so brutal. My other son, Stephen, he lives in Jakarta. He's actually boxing now by training. He spars every day, but it's just to keep fit and it's training, and he's really interested in it. I would never, ever, I hate to say this, imagine me saying this, I wouldn't encourage, I wouldn't say to any kid, be a boxer. What I would say is, go to the gym. Enjoy the gym. Enjoy the sparring if you're good enough. Don't think you're good enough until many months or weeks have passed. And don't get in the ring. A lot of guys get into the ring thinking, I'm going to be a boxer. I need to get sparring. But then they soon find out when they get the first punch in the nose, oh, that's not what I expected. So what I would say is, I wouldn't say to my kids, I want you to be a boxer. I would say to them, I will support you in anything you want to do. And if they said to me, well, I'd like to be a boxer, well, I'll support you. I'll encourage you. I'll teach you, right? Or if I'm not in that position, I will get you into a proper club where I'm comfortable with a coach and you're comfortable with a coach, because that's important. You have to trust your coach. But, I haven't got a great argument against, for example, the members of the British Medical Association who say boxing should be banned. Right. I grew up with lots of people around us in the perimeter, in the gym, helping, who were ex-fighters. Most of them not at the very highest level. We had some British Empire champions and so on. One of my coaches was a guy called Jim Brady, who was British Empire bantamweight champion, boxed Benny Lynch 3 times. It was all that kind of. A lot of guys from Dundee were like that, and they boxed in the booths and they came up the hard way. What I didn't realise at the time was that there were 2 words hadn't been invented at that time. One of them was dementia and one was Alzheimer's. The word that was invented for these guys was punchy. Right, so you would see them go about and you would hear them slurring their speech, and you're a kid growing up and you think there's nothing out of the ordinary there. But looking back, of course, now, punchy was another term for what we now know as dementia and Alzheimer's, that kind of thing. Brain damage. So it makes sense, doesn't it, to know that if you're in there, and I'm talking at a professional level, not at an amateur level, because amateurs, three rounds, 3 minutes at maximum, sometimes 2 minutes, depending on your age and your ability. But these guys were boxing like every week, twice a week. and they were boxing 6, 8, 10 rounds. And they were travelling all over the place. I mean, I've told a story recently about a lovely guy called Freddie Tennant, who, goodness knows, he must have had about 150 fights. He was a flyweight. He was so popular and such a crowd pleaser that when he went to London, he would stay there for months because he was boxing twice a week in places like Shoreditch Town Hall or York Hall, Bethnal Green, these places. And he was such an entertaining fighter that the promoters wanted him on the bill all the time. So he was fighting all these times. Now, poor Freddie, in later life, lovely man. You could see the effects it had on him. You could see the effects it had on Jim Brady, my ex-coach, and others like him who would come up and watch the sparring in our club on a Sunday. And now I'm recognising, these guys are just taking too many punches. So why would I want to put my loved ones in that situation? But that's not to say, I think sometimes kids have got to find out for themselves as well. If somebody's saying to their mum and dad, I want to join a boxing club. I need to, I love this. You say, okay, fine. What's the harm you're going to get initially? You're not going to get any harm because you're not going to be in the ring for a while to spar because you're not good enough. You're inexperienced. But they'll soon find out what it means to take a thump in the face. And that's then the reality will kick in. They might want to say, I don't fancy that. I'll just stick to punching the bag because that doesn't hit you back. Or I want to go on. But thereby hangs another tale. How far do you want them to go on? I mean, I saw Ken Buchanan was one of my pals, and we fought each other as featherweights, and he was a superb champion of the world. But he went on too long, and that's the thing about pro boxers. More often than not, they do not know. They don't recognise the signs which tell them it's time for you to hang up your gloves.
One key thing that you mentioned in there was sparring. So I don't know if you're an MMA fan, Frank, but a lot of the MMA fighters that are sort of operating at the top level now, some of them don't spar anymore effectively because of the damage that they're sort of taking. So I was interested, like once you're moving, for a decent amateur level into the pros, like at what level should they be sparring? Should they be going 60%? 70%, 80%, like should you be going at 100% every single session, or is that just excessive? Like, what's your take on that?
I've changed my mind on that one. I was raised with 100% sparring, right? You go in there, it's for real, and you go in to hurt each other. And if you're hurt, then that's your fault. That's because you've dropped your guard, or you haven't closed the door to his left jab or whatever with your backhand. And so that's how you learned in those days. I take a different view now. I want to protect young boxers and tell them the basics, the fundamentals of how to defend themselves. Because that's what it's about, the noble art of self-defense, to hit without being hit back. You're never going to achieve that, but you're going to try and minimize the damage that comes your way. And so I used to say, I can't understand this new expression, soft sparring. I used to think, what does that mean? Well, tippy-tappy, let's not hurt each other, But that's not what you're in the ring for. You've got a head guard, you've got heavy gloves. Let's go for it. And now I look at the top pros when they're sparring, they go for it. But unfortunately for their sparring partners who are well paid for entering the ring against these guys, they get hammered, That's the way we used to be all the time. Now, I'm not so sure. I like the idea. We have a thing in Aberdeen where I live, at the gym I train in, where Sunday morning 10 to 12 is sparring. And they're all told 60%. Right, let's go for that. How you judge that, I do not know. But that's the thing. Now, if you're still learning, doing 60% sparring, that's fine. But if you're not, then I think you have to move it up a bit. And I think also depends on the quality of the boxers. If you've got two really good guys, there's nothing better than watching a good spar where they're thinking, where they're trying to open up each other, where they're trying to pull each other into traps and all that kind of thing. That's for real. I like that. But for the younger ones and guys who are not fully invested in boxing but like the idea of being a boxer, and you get lots of those, 60% is fine.
I know, that's interesting. I would agree with that as well. I think that's probably about the right sort of percentage. The other thing, Frank, was one of the guys, a regular listener, Mick Kelly, he wanted me to ask you about Jack Johnson specifically, and like we talked about the heavyweights earlier. Do you know much about Jack Johnson, and like where would you rank him amongst the sort of heavyweights?
Yeah, Jack Johnson. Mick, did you say Mick Kelly?
Aye, Mick Kelly, aye.
Mick, you need to know this. Jack Johnson was a phenomenon, right? But he was a divisive character. Jack Johnson gave the white establishment in America, at the time he became the world champion, he gave them a major headache. Why? Because he was black. Secondly, because he liked to rub their noses in it, the fact that he was the first black heavyweight champion. Worse than anything else, however, the fact was all these women were white. And, so he set the white establishment against him. And he loved it. He liked the fact that he riled them and he angered them. But he was a tremendous boxer. And I think he would have gone on for a much longer time than he did as a heavyweight champion. But, of course, everything was stacked against him because they were always trying to find a great white hope to beat him. And he fought in Havana against a man called Jess Willard, who started boxing when he was 27. I think he was a farmer from Arkansas. And Jess Willard was 6'7" and had boxing talent that was kind of not even mediocre. He wasn't a great boxer, but he was big, he was strong, and he was the latest of the great white hopes that the American establishment and the promoters of the day brought against Johnson. And the fight was made in searing heat in open air in Havana in Cuba over 45 rounds. And the knockout, Willard knocked out Johnson, came in round 26, I think it was. And, of course, famously, Johnson lay on the canvas, shielding his eyes from the sun and being counted out. After which he said that he'd taken a dive because there were death threats out against him, that if you beat Willard, we'll kill you. And Willard said, that's interesting. He said, if I had a death threat against me, I would have taken a dive in round 2 and I wouldn't have waited 26 rounds before I did it. So that was an interesting take on it. But here's a better story. I don't know if you know what I'm going to say here, Paul.
Is it about the speeding ticket?
No.
No, you go. You go first.
Jack Johnson came to the UK when he was world champion. I think I'm talking from memory here, from having read this many moons ago. I think around about 1921, or maybe earlier. 1917 is in my mind. Forgive me if I'm wrong. Anyway, he comes on a tour of the UK as the world champion, and he's pulling in people to go and see him box exhibition, essentially sparring. And he's boxing in Newcastle this night. And one of the guys on the bill was a man who was a major in the army, and he was boxing professionally, and he was from Dundee. And after it, they got chatting, and he said, I'm going back home tonight, he says, on the London train, the late night train through the night up to Dundee. He said to Jack Johnson, because tomorrow I am being installed in the second phase of the Freemasons. And Johnson said, really? He said, yeah. Johnson, I don't know what's that about. So he explained what, and Johnson then says, could I join? It's a true story. So he said, yeah. He goes to a phone box, the guy, and he phones up the guys who are running the lodge in Dundee, where he's going to be, made second grade Freemason. And he said, Jack Johnson, the world. And they went, what? You're joking? He wants it? Yeah. And I know where this lodge was. It was right in the centre of town off a street called the Wellgate. And they said, of course, bring him with you. So they went up on the train. Johnson got in to the Freemason movement. The guy got his thing going. And then when word got out, the Grand Lodge of America contacted the Grand Lodge of Scotland, and then they contacted the lodge in Dundee, and they said, you can't do this. It can't just be done on a whim, on the drop of a hat. And so what they did was they rescinded Johnson. I don't know how many weeks it took. Johnson got the train that next morning. After this was done at 10 o'clock in the morning, he got the train back south because he was boxing in Leeds. So for a moment, few weeks perhaps, Jack Johnson was a Freemason and he joined in Dundee. It's a great story.
That's a brilliant story. The other one that I thought you were going to say there was, there's a brilliant documentary about Jack Johnson on YouTube as well for anybody who's interested in it. Like you say, the first black heavyweight champion in the world. But he was driving somewhere in America and he was speeding, and the cop pulled him over and he sort of says, you know, you're going too fast, like not good enough sort of thing. He's like, no problem. He says, there's a fine, unfortunately. He says, how much is your fine? $20, whatever it is. He's like, no worries. He says, there's $40. And he's like, why are you giving me like an extra $20? He says, I'm going to be speeding the way back as well. And I thought that was like...
That's a great story. And that probably epitomises the kind of character he was. He didn't give a hoot about authority. And that's why they hated him. He was a nonconformist.
See, I think that's something that a lot of fighters have got, and that's why the public are attracted to fighters in boxing, I think, because they are the rebels of society almost. They kind of have got that, you know, alpha sort of status, and they're like, I'm going to live my life however the fuck I want, and fuck your rules sort of thing. You know, we're doing our own thing over here, and that's why people are attracted to it and love the sport.
That's interesting, because that, for me, that's unattractive, right? I get it now, right? So you and I are several generations apart in age, right? What I don't want to see all this kind of stupid, nonsensical behaviour before a fight, where you've got pre-fight press conferences and guys like John Fury, who've got zero to do with it, nothing to do with it. Just so happens his son is the heavyweight champion, but he turns up and he pulls up tables, he throws things about, he's challenging Mike Tyson. And I'm saying to myself, please, Mr. Tyson, Mike, go and accept his challenge and find a gym round the corner and give him a real hammering. That's what I would like to see. It's all this kind of posturizing and being disruptive and everybody's buying into this. And I'm thinking, really, does that sell tickets? What's your view?
I don't like some of the antics in the press conference. Like, I will agree with you there. But, like, I don't know, like, if I'm going to be speaking out of turn here, but I'll just say it anyway. Like, back in the day, you know, there was all these documentaries, you know, Knuckle and all that sort of stuff about the sort of travelling community. I think that's part of the community. It's this sort of sending each other videos and sort of hyping a fight up almost. So I don't know if that's just maybe part of the sort of culture there.
You think of the great fighters of previous eras, right? You didn't get this nonsense. You didn't get the stuff that we've seen recently from Ryan Garcia and other fighters in the last 5-10 years, where they're all pointing fingers and I'm going to knock you out and I'm going to break your jaw and all. You didn't get that.
Well, let's park the Ryan Garcia thought for a minute, because I do want to talk to you about that.
Okay.
What about Muhammad Ali then and Sonny Liston and all that sort of stuff?
Well, there you are. Muhammad Ali stole this idea from wrestlers, right? I'm going to knock you out in 5. I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And of course, that was different. That was new for boxing. It had never been done before. People like the greats, my heroes like Sugar Ray Robinson, Joe Louis, Rocky Marciano, Jersey Joe Walcott, they trained, they worked hard. They got into the ring by walking without flames going and thumping music and all that. And they went in and the MC took 3 minutes, not 20 minutes, giving you, his wife works as a secretary and his weight, and the inside leg measurement is 31, and he's the 5 times world middleweight champion, and all that. But you think, for God's sake, just announce their names. Tell us he's the world champion. We know he's wearing black and white. We could see it. We know that, that he lives in Arkansas or in Texas. We know all that. Don't just regurgitate everything we know. All it does, you imagine a boxer who's been warming up for a fight, and the first bell goes, 20, 25 minutes later, after he got into the ring, and he's trying to keep focused, he's trying to be in the zone, and all this nonsense is going on. Does that sell tickets? I don't know. For me, it doesn't. I just want to see the guys going in there under the canopy of lights with the whole arena in darkness. And I want to feel that. I want to touch that atmosphere. And for me, that kind of reality has been taken away from boxing with all this razzmatazz. Ali did it. It was new. It was fresh. For purists like me and my dad, I remember we used to discuss it. It was horrendous. I'm thinking, what is he trying to do? And we know what he was trying to do. He was trying to sell tickets. And he just stole those ideas from the WWE guys in America who went about shouting their mouths off. But wrestling's not a sport. It's showbiz.
It's entertainment.
Yeah.
What's your sort of opinion on, like, Muhammad Ali is like a cultural icon then? Because obviously, like you're saying, we're for generations apart. But for me, one of the most charismatic people to ever sort of walk the planet, and I think he will be remembered for the next 100, 200 years. What do you think about him that made him that special?
I agree. But Muhammad Ali just underlines how important the heavyweight champion of the world is, or was, right? Now, it was the biggest prize in sport anywhere in the world. Right now we've got these fabulously wealthy NFL players and basketball players and football players here in the UK and abroad who've kind of overtaken the boxers in terms of their wealth. But in the days around about Ali and before then, the heavyweight champion of the world was the iconic figure in sport, anywhere, in all sports. Now, it's not quite the same now. It's changed, and not for the better in my view. But Ali was superb, right? Ali was the guy who actually boxed like a lightweight or a welterweight because he was so fleet of foot. We could see that. And in his prime, he never carried an ounce overweight. He was a beautiful athlete, and he was a master fighter. But again, he was a heavyweight, and he got away with stuff that he wouldn't get when had he been a shorter guy or a lighter guy in a smaller division. He used, for example, when he was, if you look at the George Foreman fight, when he claimed that his tactics were to rope a dope, I refute that. I think that's with the benefit of hindsight. Ali took a real doing in that fight. He finished it in about 10 seconds. But if you were to examine how many punches he took as opposed to George Foreman, my guess is that he took many, many more punches than Foreman did. It's just that Foreman just shot his bolt, and he was goosed. And Ali saw the moment, grabbed it, and finished the fight. But Ali at that time, if you remember, if you look back on that fight, Ali did the one thing that you're not supposed to do in boxing. You're supposed to protect your chin and tuck it down. Right, well, that happens in the lighter weights. You see the guys getting the chin down and the head moves. Look at Canelo. Moves the head all the time. Hard target the head. Ali did what you shouldn't do. Ali put his head back, up, and the chin went up, back like this. And it's almost like saying, there's my chin, have a go. It was a novice thing to do, believe it or not, because you think you're getting away from the punches when in fact you're putting your chin right on the line for your opponent. But he was phenomenal. And he was charismatic. And he was the great thing about Ali was he was different in boxing because Ali could go on and be interviewed like a movie star or, a show business guy. And he could hold his own with politicians and all the rest of it. Now, you don't get that in boxing. You get mumblers. You get guys who wouldn't know the prime minister of their own country or the vice president of, you get, they're not tuned into that kind of thing. They're not educated. And I think that's where Ali stood out. He was outstanding because he knew a lot about a lot.
Aye, no, absolutely phenomenal. And that Jack Johnson in him as well, in terms of he wasn't afraid to, stand to his principles and tell people to go and fuck off, obviously, with the whole Vietnam stuff and all that.
Yeah.
Aye, we've talked about the sort of some of the international boxers, but maybe closer to home, you mentioned, obviously, fighting family and your brothers. Are you aware of the McMillans at all? Donnie McMillan and his brothers?
Yeah, well, I know of them, of course. I never met them. You see, what you've got to remember is I was 21 and I thought, right, that's me finished. Far enough. I've done enough. I lost my kind of pizzazz, lost my drive, trained for years and years and years, trained with the professionals, Walter McGowan's chief sparring partner, training with him at weekends, during the week and all that stuff. And I thought, right, I need to do something else. And in fact, it's not a lot of people know this, but when I was 19 and I was kind of at the peak, right? Between the ages of 16 and 20, I was at my best. And I was doing well. And I'd been at the European Championships. But at that time, right in the middle of that, I became a singer in a pop group. And it was great. I saw an advert in the paper from this band in Dundee saying, we need a singer. We've sacked our previous singer. We need a singer. And I thought, I could do that. Right. And I could do it, because when I was a kid, I went to Butlins a lot, right? The Butlins holiday camp. And my mother kind of pushed me. I was going to say encouraged me. It wasn't encouragement. She pushed me into entering the junior talent contest. And I won it twice. I won it once and I was runner-up once.
What did you sing?
Oh, in those days, when I was at Butlins, it was something like, I remember singing the Connie Francis hit, right? You're wondering who I am. Yeah, you're shaking your head. And it was called Who's Sorry Now? It's an old, it was even old when I was singing it. And the other one was, had been singing the blues, right? Guy Mitchell's American style. These people are just names, meaningless names to you guys. However, so I thought, I'm going to do that, And I went and did it. And I did it for a year. But listen, so we had a residency in Perth City Hall. It's a big hall. I won a lot of championships in Perth City Hall. But then now I'm singing, right? And we're the warm-up band for the dancers before Manfred Mann came on, The Who, Johnny Kidd and the Pirates, Dave Berry and the Cruisers, all the big names in the 60s who were on tour and would have Perth as one of their dates. We were the warm-up band and the warm-down band as well. When they did their, whatever they did an hour, we would go back on and do our stuff for the dancers who wanted to dance. So that was a great escape for me. And then you begin to realise there's more to life than just going to the gym and boxing. There's fun out there. And so I stuck with it. And I remember my last, I'm maybe going off script here. And I can't even remember what the question was. See, I'm beginning to go do lally, Paul. And
I was asking you about the McMillans, and then you were segueing into
the McMillans.
your pop
the
career.
McMillan, so you get the McMillan family. There you are. I think, was there 7 of them? Something like that. There was a huge clan of them, all of them good quality, decent boxers, because they did it the right way, and they were in it, whatever club they were in, it was a club which suited them and brought the best out of them. But you got lots of families like that where you got 2 brothers or 3 brothers and so on, and they would encourage each other, go to the gym. And so these guys were true boxers. They were invested totally in the sport, but But there again, you've got the question, and I don't know the ins and outs of the McMillan family. Of course, I knew about them. But sometimes you think, generally, in boxing, you think, well, some guys stay on too long. And, you've got to recognise, if you can, this is a tough sport. I can't hang on in there forever and ever, because then I'll begin to slow down. My speed of thought will go, and I'll start to take punches from younger boys that I would never have done, a year, 2, 5 years earlier.
I know, absolutely. There's a great documentary. A guy I know for Saltcoat, Stein McMillan, is the grandson, Donny McMillan. He's produced this documentary, and it's brilliant. The fight McMillan, so I'd recommend that to people. The family being inducted into the Scottish Boxing Hall of Fame, and it's a good story. Frank, appreciate it. We've done nearly about an hour now, and I know you need to head back up the road, so I'm desperate to ask you about your broadcasting career, because I seen when I was researching you'd interviewed the late great Jock Stein. Can you talk to us about what Big Jock was like?
I like Jock Stein, but I recognise that Jock had a fiery temper, and then I've tried to analyse this because I never had a run-in with Jock Stein. I found him, I was in awe of him, because if people remember this, he became one of the first pundits on TV. I think when he was ITV, you would have a panel of pundits in, like Brian Clough and these kind of famous managers, to analyse certain international games and so on. Stein always had, for me, always spoke common sense. He was the expert analyst. He could pick out things from games that other people didn't recognise. And when I interviewed him several times, I think the one you're referring to was when we were in Gothenburg for the Aberdeen-Real Madrid European Cup Winners' Cup final, which Aberdeen won. And Jock was there, and we'd made arrangements that he would be interviewed by me before the game. And I was intrigued because he called it absolutely right. He said, Real Madrid are a great club, but they're not, at that moment, they weren't at their best. They weren't the best Real Madrid team that's ever been on the pitch. And the fact that it was torrential rain, it suited Aberdeen and so on. And he called it, he said, Aberdeen will win tonight. And so I admired that about him. He had great stature. I love Stein for the fact that he was, he could walk into a room and immediately his presence would be felt. However, I've seen him in action on the other, against journalists who maybe he felt has stepped out of line and asked a question which he didn't like, and he would tear a strip off them. So, that was the way he was, but that's the way it was with lots and lots of football managers, if they don't like what you're going to ask.
I know, it's interesting you mention that sort of aura. Like, that seems to be what a lot of people say. Like, where do you think that comes from? Like, what makes a person have that kind of aura? Any thoughts on that?
I think part of the thing is that if a person's got a reputation, right, and he has built this reputation not just overnight, he built it over a long, long period. Not just Stein, but I'm talking about generally. So if you've got this person and he has reached the very top of his profession, then I think the aura comes with it. Right? I don't think, Jock Stein, when he was managing the Celtic team, when he first took over and they were losing all the time, and he was bringing through the young boys like Bobby Murdoch, Jimmy Johnson, Bobby Lennox. I saw them in those days. And they were finding it really difficult. He was still trying to get to grips with how to build a team. And he was doing it with young players that nobody'd heard of. And he brought them in and he said, right, I'm going to stick with these guys. Right, I'm going to make sure that I'm not going to just bounce somebody out of the team because they've had a bad game. We're going to go for it. We're going to get a system and we're going to make it work. And that's what he did. So he's built up that, and with that, he's built an aura about him. It's like when I trained with Sugar Ray Robinson. Sugar Ray Robinson came into the room, in the changing room, and Sugar Ray Robinson was like, what would it be like? It would be like meeting John Lennon or Paul McCartney. And for a young singer, for example, a young musician, and he walks in the room, you think, well, I just saw this star, this movie star, this guy who was elegant, who had the movement of a dancer, because he used to be a tap dancer, and he had the elegance of a gazelle, and he was so beautifully dressed and athletic looking. He was 43. It was a year before he retired. He was here to box at Paisley Ice Rink, and I was training with him. And that's what you call an aura. In the early days, he wouldn't have had that aura, but because he'd built this reputation and built this kind of following, because he was the best of the best, like Jock Stein, he was the best of the best. So when he walks in that room and he has this presence, and he's a big man, you know that somebody special has come in. It's Jock Stein, and you know why he's special, because you know of what his achievements were.
Aye. So is he the best then? When you compare him to, I know you've had issues with Sir Alex, but Bob, like Shankly and Paisley and all that, like Jock Stein is the top of the top for you?
Yeah, for me, he was. But then let's not take it away from Sir Alex Ferguson. He was a phenomenal manager, right? Okay, I was one of many journalists who, got on his wrong side from time to time, and I didn't like it. He didn't like it. I didn't like it. I didn't like it more than he didn't like it. Alex Ferguson, like a lot of managers, Stein was guilty of this as well, would use the media, would manipulate the weak guys in the media and get them to use stuff that he wanted in the paper or he wanted on TV. And that was his skill. And he would turn the media against his players. And he would use the media as a target. Look what they're saying about you. Look, you said you had a poor result and you were terrible, you didn't play well. Look what they're saying about you. And they would say, and he would say, right, so now you go out and show them. Outside the Pataudry dressing room, he would pin up cuttings from newspapers that were critical of his team in the previous game or games. And he would say, that's what they're saying about you. What are you going to do about it? And this would fire them up. They were young boys. They were malleable. And so, but if you're a media guy who asked a question he didn't like or who questioned something he had done, then you were the enemy, right? And so you forget about all the PR people that there are now, and you can't reach a player, you can't reach the manager, you got to go through the barrier. The barrier is a PR person, right? You can't get to them. Whereas in my day, you could get to them. You had their phone numbers. You'd be able to phone them. You'd be able to talk to them on a kind of one-to-one basis, man to man, and say, look, what's happening here? Tell me what's this going about? Is it true that you're going to buy this player? Now, of course, it's all a press conference. Don't get near them. And
it's because it's all commercial, right? So they're public limited companies and there's share prices and all that shite. So they all get media training. And
I don't know. I don't know if it's that. I just think it's like we can't be bothered with the media. They are a chore that we have to subject ourselves to once a week or twice a week. We have to, you've just finished a game now. You just imagine any football manager at the end of an important game or any game. He's run ragged. He's exhausted. He's been, his mind has been racing for 90 minutes. And then he's trying to, maybe getting beat and all that stuff's going on in his brain. And it drains you. Now, the last thing you want to do is have a microphone put in front of you and say, well, what do you make of that? You think, well, what do you think of me? So that, I understand that. I get that. But that's part of the business they're in. They've got to do that, But more and more, they would rather not do it because media guys like me are just a pain in the neck.
It's part, like, Sky are paying them all that money though, right? And Sky are obviously investing in the broadcasting side of things so that they can retain the viewers and say to fucking Nike and Nivea and Gillette and all that, here we've got people tuning in for 3-4 hours a week or whatever it is. So it's part of the beast, unfortunately. If they want to be getting that money, then they need to play the game, don't they?
Oh yeah, but listen to this. I have very long years of experience working for Sky in Scotland as a reporter for Gillette Soccer Saturday and Gillette Soccer Special. And what I find, so Sky had a deal, right? We used to have a live link after a game, any game, down to London, where we could feed the interviews straight in to Sky, who would edit, right? So the deal was that the manager had, this link was cut at 5:15, so that's half an hour after. The deal was that the manager should be with us and interviewed and finished by 5:15, so that it's all done and dusted. I won't mention them, but there were 2 or 3 managers who did not give a toss about that. And they would stroll in at 5:30, 20 to 6. And I would say, I'm not going to mention any names, but I would say, Derek, we've missed it. Derek, sorry. Mr. McKinnon, did I say I was going to mention the name? And Derek's a lovely guy. Derek McKinnon's a lovely guy. But my goodness, I said, for goodness sake, Derek, every week this happens. You come in late, you don't give a toss. And I'm just, okay, fine, let's go on with it. So we're kind of way down the pecking order. So forget about agreements that were done. And I would complain. I would say to, the SFA delegate would be there and come and say, everything, they would tick their boxes, everything go all right with the media today? And, no, not really. Oh, hang on. Somebody's got a journalist complaining. Why? Well, I'll tell you why. Because the manager, he took, 45 minutes to come and speak to us. All right. Now, I know this delegate is not going to report this back to the SFA because, who cares about the press? They don't care. You've got an agreement, stick to it. But they didn't.
Aye. Cool. Frank, I think I'll ask you one more thing because I know we're pressed for time here and then we'll call it. So you mentioned Ryan Garcia earlier. Another doping scandal in boxing. What's your sort of thoughts on it?
Ban him. Simple. Any cheat should be banned. He's a cheat. So if Garcia has been found taking some kind of drugs, performance-enhancing drugs, and I don't know if we can link this, but we know that his behaviour leading up to the fight with Haney was questionable. He did lots of stuff that was just completely off the wall and crazy on a kind of an ongoing basis. Every day he was coming up with new stuff that was just outrageous. And you would say, there's something not right here. Now, nobody could, well, maybe some people could say, well, maybe there are drugs involved. Maybe, because the behaviour would suggest that something certainly wasn't right. And then we find, okay, he's 3 pounds overweight. That's unacceptable. And he's prepared to forfeit $1.5 million, giving it to Haney for every, $500,000 for every pound that he's overweight. I'll give you that money. That shows you the ridiculous amounts of money these guys are making, and that he can afford to give $1.5 million to his opponent. So then you're thinking, that's strange behaviour. And now we find that he's taken performance-enhancing drugs. Like all athletes, and we've seen this over the years in all different sports, if you've been taking an illegal substance which helps you perform better and go on to victory, you need to be out that sport. I would throw them out tomorrow.
So a lifetime ban are you talking about for him, if he's done this, like, deliberately?
Yeah, I would say, out, you're finished. Now, he's a big, big name, right? That's a prime example to all the young people who are coming through into boxing. This is not what you do. Because if you do that, you're going to be punished. Your career will be over. Now, isn't that a deterrent? I think it is.
It was certainly put folk off, aye. Do you think that there's been like an increasing trend in the recent years in the pro ranks with regards to performance enhancers and drugs, or do you think it was always there? It's just maybe the testing is getting better.
I think the testing is getting better, but also I think the drugs are getting better. I'm not convinced that it's always been there, because this is a kind of, when I say it's a new phenomenon, we're talking about the last 20 or 30 years. But before that, they wouldn't get, performance-enhancing drugs. You wouldn't know where to go to find these stuff. This is all new stuff, right? And you've got You've got the suppliers who are going to athletes of all sports and saying, you need to take this supplement. This will be good for you. This will help you. This will make you run faster, jump higher, punch harder, all that stuff. These people are buying into it because they want to be the best. But what's the point of being best if it's not with your own ability and your own, everything that you own? What if you've got to have something outside to come and help you? Does that make you the best? I don't think so.
I think it's weak personally. I'm not a fan of performance enhancing drugs in any sport, but I think in boxing and fighting specifically it's the worst because of obviously what the consequences can be. So I'm certainly in favour of a considerable ban for him, because it seems like he failed it on the day before they found it and then the day of, which seems a bit suspicious to me, because even if he was taking something that he shouldn't be taking, I'd be surprised if it had, that type of with steroid or whatever it was in it.
So, and anyway, who's going to miss him? Kick him out of boxing. He'll be, be forgotten about in a fortnight. Everything, life moves on, right? We find new champions. We find new up-and-coming, exciting talent who, will be doing their stuff, will be exciting the crowds, and then they'll think, somewhere down the line, in a few weeks, couple of months, people saying, oh yeah, Ryan Garcia, I remember him, wouldn't he? But that's the way it goes. Life carries on.
I think that's a good way to end it there, Frank. And just to confirm, we've got this bet on, so if Fury wins, you're back in, and if Usyk wins, I'll never see you again,
it's
right?
a deal.
Right, good man, Frank. Appreciate this, mate. What I would say as well is to people, if they enjoyed this, like and subscribe. It costs nothing on YouTube to subscribe. You need 500 subscribers to start sort of monetising the channel. I'm putting this out for free, so if they could subscribe, I would really, really appreciate it.
I would hope that you do. It's you guys out there do subscribe to the channel because Paul does a wonderful job. But the reason I'm interrupting him is not to congratulate him, is to say you need to go on my Instagram page, Frank's Noble Art, and follow me and share. On TikTok, it's at Gilfeather. So please help me, poor old guy like me, 78. Come on, I need the followers. Thank you.
No, absolutely. Follow Frank, and we'll catch up again soon.